Hey everyone! Today we're diving into one of the most important battles in history, the Battle of Tours. This wasn't just any fight, it was a showdown that helped shape Europe's future. It happened on October 10, 732, and it was between the Frankish and Aquitanian forces, led by Charles Martel, and the Umayyad forces, commanded by Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, the governor of Al-Andalus. In the end, the Franks won, and many believe this victory stopped the spread of Islam into Western Europe. The exact details of the battle are a bit unclear since the records from back then don't completely match up. Most agree that the Umayyads had a larger army, but they suffered much heavier losses. The Franks didn't even have heavy cavalry, which makes their victory even more surprising. The battle happened somewhere between the cities of Poitiers and Tours, in what's now western France. At the time, this area was near the border of the Frankish kingdom and the independent Duchy of Aquitaine, ruled by Odo the Great. During the fight, Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi was killed, and after that, the Umayyad army decided to retreat. This moment marked the rise of Frankish power in Western Europe and set the stage for the Carolingian Empire. Many historians think this battle was a big deal, because it confirmed the Franks' dominance and stopped the Umayyad expansion. To get why this battle mattered so much, you have to know what led up to it. About 20 years earlier, the Umayyads started invading Gaul. In 711, they had already conquered the Visigothic kingdom in Spain. From there, they moved north into parts of France, attacking places like Aquitaine and Burgundy. They even raided Bordeaux and Autun. Charles Martel's victory at Tours is often seen as the point where the Umayyads' northward push was stopped. Without this win, Europe might look very different today. Most historians think the battle took place near the rivers Claine and Vienne, but the exact spot is still debated. And when it comes to army sizes, the numbers are all over the place. Some say the Umayyads had up to 80,000 troops while the Franks had around 30,000. Others think both sides had about 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers. Either way, the Franks were definitely up against a strong enemy. We're also not sure how many people died. Some reports say Charles Martel only lost 1,500 men, while the Umayyads might have lost tens of thousands. But these numbers could be exaggerated. After the battle, the Umayyads burned and looted some areas as they retreated, so they weren't completely wiped out. At the time, the Umayyad Caliphate was one of the most powerful empires in the world. It stretched across North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. They had already defeated the Sasanian Empire and taken parts of the Byzantine Empire. Their armies were well trained and equipped. Meanwhile, the Franks under Charles Martel were rising as a major power in Western Europe, but they still had problems with rival tribes and local rulers. The Umayyads had already taken most of Spain and southern France. They set up a base in Narbonne in 720 and captured nearby cities. They faced resistance at the Battle of Toulouse, where Duke Odo the Great managed to pull off a surprise victory. But that didn't stop the Umayyads. By the time they reached Bordeaux, they defeated Odo's forces and kept moving north, leaving destruction behind them. Odo was desperate, so he asked Charles Martel for help. Martel agreed, but only if Odo accepted Frankish rule. This set the stage for the Battle of Tours. Interestingly, the Umayyads didn't seem to realize how strong the Franks were. They thought they were just another group of tribes and didn't expect much of a fight. That mistake cost them big time. And the clash that unfolded between the Franks and the Umayyads near Tours in October 732 wasn't an impulsive skirmish, but the result of calculated strategies and tense waiting. Charles Martel, with his forces well prepared, managed to surprise the invading army, led by Abd al-Rahman. Instead of rushing into an attack, Charles formed his troops into a solid defensive position, relying on the natural landscape of hills and trees to disrupt cavalry movements. For several days, the two sides tested each other's patience. The Umayyads hesitated, hoping their reinforcements would arrive, while Charles stood firm, knowing he had the upper hand with a well-trained army and favorable terrain. Despite Abd al-Rahman's experience as a commander, he found himself at a disadvantage, unable to gauge the true size of the Frankish forces hidden within the forest. This miscalculation allowed Charles to mask his numbers and maintain an air of unpredictability. Charles's army was not an ordinary group of fighters. Many of his men had been with him through past battles, some as far back as 717. They were disciplined and tough, used to following his leadership. Alongside them stood militia recruits who had limited battle experience but were ready to defend their homeland. Historians have long debated whether the Franks were heavily outnumbered, with some sources claiming they faced a force twice their size. Others, like the Mozarabic Chronicle of 754, suggest that the Franks may have held numerical parity, or even an edge in manpower. The pressure on Abd al-Rahman mounted as winter approached. He couldn't delay the fight much longer, especially with his army burdened by the loot they'd gathered during their march. On the seventh day he ordered a full-scale assault, trusting in the strength of his cavalry. Wave after wave of attacks came crashing into the Frankish lines, yet Charles's troops held their ground. The defensive square they'd formed absorbed the shock of the cavalry charges, refusing to break even when parts of the formation were breached. Arab sources acknowledge that the cavalry managed to penetrate the Frankish lines multiple times, but each breach was quickly sealed as the disciplined infantry pushed back. Charles' soldiers had defied expectations, proving that determined infantry could stand against heavy cavalry. Their endurance and cohesion were vital to the outcome. The fighting raged on, but as night fell, neither side had achieved a decisive victory. When dawn broke, the Franks prepared for another day of battle. However, to their surprise, they found the Umayyad camp abandoned. Under the cover of darkness, Abd al-Rahman's forces had withdrawn, leaving behind their tents and much of their plunder. The Franks cautiously approached the empty camp, only to confirm that the enemy had retreated. The sudden withdrawal of the Umayyads marked the turning point. Abd al-Rahman's missteps, his failure to properly scout the Frankish forces, and his underestimation of Charles' ability to rally and lead, had left his army vulnerable. Burdened by loot and lacking coordination, the Umayyads were forced to retreat south, over the Pyrenees. Though the immediate threat had passed, Charles Martel knew the danger wasn't entirely over. He continued to strengthen his defenses and consolidate power, anticipating further incursions. In the years that followed, he expanded his influence, securing alliances and fortifying territories to prepare for any future conflicts. Despite setbacks, the Umayyads made another attempt to push into Frankish lands, launching an invasion in 735 under Uqba ibn al-Hajjaj. This time, they advanced deeper into Provence, capturing cities and looting along the way. Charles, however, was ready. Over the next few years, he fought back with determination, reclaiming lost territories and pushing the invaders out. By the time of his death, Charles Martel had firmly established his legacy as a defender of Western Europe. His victories at Tours and in subsequent battles set the stage for the rise of the Carolingian dynasty. While the Umayyads retained control over parts of Spain, their ambitions of conquering Gaul were crushed. Charles's son, Pepin the Short, would later complete what his father began, bringing the last strongholds of Muslim power in the region under Frankish control. The Battle of Tours remains one of history's defining moments, remembered not just for its military significance, but for its lasting impact on the balance of power in medieval Europe. It demonstrated the importance of preparation, discipline, and leadership, qualities that turned the tide in favor of Charles Martel and his army. The victory at Tours also reshaped the cultural and religious landscape of Europe. It cemented the dominance of Christianity in the region and halted the northward expansion of Islam. This battle laid the groundwork for the Carolingian Renaissance, a period marked by cultural revival and intellectual growth. Charles Martel's actions ensured that future generations would inherit a Europe shaped by Christian traditions, fostering the development of medieval kingdoms and eventually modern Europe.